Okay, Alcoholics Anonymous is a fellowship of men and women who share their experience, strength, and hope with each other that they may solve their common problem and help others to recover from alcoholism. The only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. There are no dues or fees for a membership. We are self-supporting through our own contributions. AA is not allied with any sect, denomination, politics, organization, or institution, does not wish to engage in any controversy, neither endorses nor opposes any causes. Our primary purpose is to stay sober and help other alcoholics to achieve sobriety. So welcome to our speakers meeting. The format of this meeting is that the speaker will speak for 30 minutes, and then we will open for questions and answers or shares after the meeting. This meeting is being recorded and will be available on YouTube in a few hours. And tonight, our speaker is Seth. Seth, whenever you're ready.
Makes me more grateful every day that YouTube didn't exist when I was still drinking, or at least when I was in high school. Good morning, or afternoon, evening. My name's Seth, and I'm an alcoholic. And my sobriety date is November 6th of 2019. And I wanted to start off this session with something that really caught my attention in the foreword of the 12 and 12 the other day when I was reading it, because it sets a good ground for how I view my life prior to finding this program. And it says, AA's 12 steps are a group of principles, spiritual in their nature, which, if practiced as a way of life, can expel the obsession to drink and enable the sufferer to become happily and usefully whole. And when I was kind of running back the events of my life, the notion of any part of that being happily or usefully whole was completely lost. My whole MO in my prior life was that I always felt less than, I always felt out of place. And despite fleeting moments of happiness, I was lost, completely lost. And I was basically a paradox of a bunch of conflicting ideas. I always got kicked out of class in school because I was a jokester and always playing pranks, but yet everyone always accused me of taking myself too seriously. So I couldn't understand that. I referred to myself as an introverted extrovert because I didn't really like people, but at the same time, I desperately required their approval in order to feel like I was succeeding at life and like I was doing well. I was nice to people that I knew and liked and trusted, but if I didn't know you, then I would be wholly dismissive of you and wouldn't even make an effort to get to know you or try altogether. And I was cripplingly insecure, but at the same time, I was incredibly arrogant. So that was me in a nutshell, just kind of going back and forth on this pendulum of insanity, but what lacked was any sort of consistency or balance in my life. And I always laugh because the first childhood memory that I have was running away from home when I was 3 years old. My mom was unpacking groceries, and she caught me three blocks down the street, and I almost jumped into a lake. And I was with my companion dog by my side, and these are her words. She said, she looked at me and called my name, and then I looked up at her, and despite not saying anything, my eyes said, and I apologize for the profanity, but my eyes said to her, "What the fuck do you want?" And run away I did for the next 30 plus years of my life. I pivoted on that experience, and one of my next memories was when I was in kindergarten. The teacher was punishing me for talking out of turn, and put me in the corner. And I don't know how this was even possible, but I walked out of the school and walked home as a 5-year-old. My mom opened the door and said, "How did you get home?" And I said, "I didn't want to get in trouble." And that was emblematic of me. And so these ongoing temper tantrums, this hyper competitive nature that just stayed with me forever. And I always had to be better than everyone else. I always had to win. And if I didn't, then I couldn't cope with life. I was the kid that punted basketballs in 3rd grade. I got kicked out of a game because I questioned the referee's efficacy and called him a dickhead because he wasn't calling a foul, even though I wasn't getting fouled. And I remember going home that day, and my parents just told me to go up the stairs because they didn't know what to do with me. And there's a family holiday picture from that day that always reminds me of what happened right before that picture was taken. And I was uncontrollable. And I feel bad for my parents now because that's how I always behaved. And despite any of their best efforts, there was no drawing boundaries around me because I would find a way to run through them, manipulate them, or make their lives so tedious and complicated that they would regret ever trying to punish me whatsoever. And by virtue of that, I got to embark on a self-defined growth program, which resulted in 7-year-old me staying 7-year-old me, even though I was actually 35. And all my life, I was just looking for constant escapes. You know, before drugs and alcohol, it was sports. I would walk out of my house on a Saturday morning with a basketball in my hand. I would go play with neighbor kids starting at 7 in the morning. I probably wouldn't come back home unless I needed a snack until 7 at night because I did not want to be home. I did not want to be in my mind. I did not want to be doing nothing. And doing was succeeding and achieving for me in my entire life. And sports was an outlet that I could feel good about myself, but that was always fleeting. I didn't win, surprisingly, every game, even though I should have had the refs made the appropriate calls. But I just felt no sense of self, no self-esteem. And that enthusiasm for sport didn't translate, unfortunately, to the classroom until much later in life. So I just kind of meandered by, never put in the work in school and didn't really care one way or another. And I was just uncomfortable. I was uncomfortable being me. I felt out of place. I felt physically weird. I was kind of like a little porky kid, even though I ran around and played sports all the time. It was always baffling to me. And then 7th grade came around where awkwardness gets increased exponentially. But that was also the time that I found alcohol. And my first memory of drinking was splitting a 12-pack of Bud Ice that we had taken a taxi to have a homeless person outside of the store buy for us, and then took a taxi back to my friend's house and drank it. And I'm not sure if any of you remember Thundercats, but what I felt like Lion-O when he gets the Sword of Omens and he says, "Give me sight beyond sight," because I was empowered. This porky little introverted extrovert, awkward kid suddenly felt like he fit into the world, like he was attractive, like he could make people laugh, like he wasn't less than all the time. And that was empowering and amazing. And as a result of that, my social life became drinking, starting from when I was 12 years old and pretty much every weekend thereafter. And as a result of that, my friends started to change. If you weren't partying, we weren't rolling together. And I left a lot of my good friends as a result of that. And it got a lot worse before it got better, because right around that same time, as my consumption started increasing and I started experimenting more and more, the little me got a big shock because my parents told me that they were getting divorced. And it just so happened that it was the same time that my older brother was leaving for college. So for someone who had a pretty exceptional and very privileged upbringing, this was the biggest outside shock to my system. And I had no idea how to cope with it because I couldn't talk to people. They took me to go see a therapist. I walked in the therapist's office, sat there for a minute, and excuse my language again, she started asking me questions. I stood up, I said, "Fuck you," and I walked out. And that was basically how I approached things. I was like Elsa, conceal, don't feel. So if something felt painful, I discarded it, threw some dirt on top of it and pretend it didn't exist, and then went on to chase something else that made me feel good. And that next year of my life was pretty not good. I started rolling with a crowd of people that I would question even rolling with as a 35-year-old. I started kind of just withdrawing altogether. It was probably the worst time that I've had at school. But fortunately, I somewhat grew out of that and, found myself finding a way to take advantage of the situation with my parents' divorce. And nothing's better than being able to play your parents against one another. And if someone's out of town or not home, then why can't you go and stay there? So I thought that I was 19 when I was 14. And by virtue of that, I should stay at home unattended and alone. And I would bend the rules and the truth in order to get that. But then I went to college, took a couple steps back in terms of my liberation because I had resident advisors who narked on you all the time and had to get used to that. But I'll never forget one day in college when one of my Spanish professors was telling a story about this thesis that he read. And what he was saying was that your life cannot be an orgasm. And I hit me really hard because my entire life, all I did was chase things that made me feel good. I refused to let myself feel bad. And if I did, I would will myself away from it and drink, drug, do whatever I needed to chase that feeling away. And if that didn't work, then I would just sprint. I would run so hard and run myself into the ground that I couldn't feel anything because I would be so darn tired that I could finally sleep that night. And the funny thing is when I said I was a jokester, but also too serious, it's impossible for life to be an orgasm when you fret about grades like I did. I don't know what happened in my life to make me flip this switch from mediocre student to someone who was psychotic about it. But I used to have panic attacks about tests. I would wake up in the middle of the night, like dry mouth, and it became my God. I had to get good grades because once you got good grades, then everything else in your life worked out, or so I presumed. So when I was doing my study abroad in Argentina, I had to get an EKG as a 19-year-old because I was so fretting about my cost accounting test that I actually thought that I was having palpitations in my chest and going to have a heart attack, which I think is actually impossible for a 19-year-old. And I took things that seriously because that was my escape. If I got good grades, then something else would work out down the road. Unfortunately, when I graduated college, despite the fact that I did get good grades, no one invited me to be the CEO of their company. And so I had to start back at the bottom and work my way up. And a man of my talents and aspirations did not need to start at the bottom. And this was real life lesson number one for me, because I thought I would just coast into some cush job and people would bow down and say, oh my God, that's the guy that got a 3.6 in college. Turns out no one does that. They made me deliver water at the company that I work for instead. So first dose of humility, much appreciated. I left that company after 4 years. And, it didn't get better after that. My early 20s was like a whirlwind, a little bit of a tornado. Everyone came back to Dallas from college and brought all their new party tricks back home. And it was a real mess for a lot of years. And during that time, I found the love of my life. And lucky for me, she was part of my twister too. And together we tore it up. We were like Pamela Lee and Tommy Lee most of the time until we weren't. And then it was violent and ugly and a lot of tears and messy. And the best part, one of the best moments of my life was when my wife got sober, because she got sober 5 years before me. But unfortunately for me, that didn't wake me up as to what my problem was, because she had the drinking problem because she was the one that couldn't control it. I could skate by. I was doing just great, living it life until I wasn't, and I couldn't run and I couldn't hide anymore. And I'll never forget the last bouts of my party boy phase. And it was Halloween of 2019. And I was dressed up in this head to toe costume. I was going to get my alchemy perfect in terms of how my THC levels plus my BAC were going to be at this great level. So I would go to this party and have a great time. And I went to this party and I put on my little helmet and I just walked around like a pinball, just bouncing room to room. I wanted to be around people, but I didn't want to talk to anyone. I wanted to be out of my house, but I didn't want to be near anyone. And I was the most uncomfortable that I had ever been in my entire life. And it screamed to me that this is no longer working. Fortunately for me, someone else also said that it was not working. And 3 days later, my wife told me that she was going to divorce me, that she no longer trusted me at our home. And unless I committed to 90 meetings in 90 days, I was going to be living alone. And for a prideful man such as myself, I would not give her the relief of divorcing me that easily. So the next morning, I went to an AA meeting. And, people were laughing, having a good time. But again, I'm wearing a suit because I'm coming from work and I'm kind of a big deal. And so this group, wasn't mine, but I'll go try this other group. And I did. And I started seeing people a little more eye to eye with me, that were more relatable. And 3 days later, I got on one knee and I asked a boy to be my sponsor. And it's been awesome ever since. So what I am going to pivot to now is, I was going back, and there are a few very select readings that have had probably the most profound impact in terms of my development to date. So I'm going to go back and revisit those and talk about what I learned both of myself at the time through those, how they interweave with my life, and how my life is like now as a result of that learning. So the first one, most important one, my baby boy, is from step 1 of the 12 and 12. And it's by going back in our drinking histories, we could show that years before we realized it, we were out of control, that our drinking then was no mere habit, that it was indeed the beginning of a fatal progression. And I always viewed myself as a social drinker. I just like to be, laugh and watch sports and be with people. And I knew that I couldn't have one drink, but who really had one drink ever? If you're going to go out, it's 10 or 0. And I saw people that would, hide it well, and they'd go out and only have 2 drinks and then go home. But I'm sure that when they went home, they had 8 more, just like me. And so I was just awash. I was like, I'm not an alcoholic, am I? And I kept on being convinced that because I hadn't been to an insane asylum, because I hadn't been incarcerated, that precluded me from being an alcoholic. And I'll never forget one of my probably 3rd week of sobriety. It was at a Saturday meeting at my old home group. And the topic was institutions. And, I was me and 4 other people who were all on like a release program. And they were talking about jail and rehab. And I called my sponsor up immediately after. And I was like, dude, you'll never believe what I just had to endure. And he was like, oh, really? Holier than thou, boy. And I was like, yeah, it was offensive. And what he told me, his first question was, how many times did you drink while you were inebriated? And I was like, 150, 200. And he's like, okay, so that's a lot of DUIs. And I was like, yeah, that would be a lot of DUIs. And he was like, well, how many times should you have been arrested? And I was like, yeah, for like narcotics and stuff too. And he's like, yeah. And what that illustrated for me was I was not the pretty boy, goody two shoes that I thought I was, that I was just happened to be the luckiest man on earth that was yet to have a DUI despite being a complete idiot and moron. And when I looked back at my life, I had been to the hospital for drinking. I had gotten no less than 2 concussions because I had fainted and hit my head. And I, on my bachelor party, got stitches in my ear, and I didn't know about it until 2 days later when my wife asked me why blood was coming out of my ear. So that, coupled with all the moral hangovers, I could quickly see that it was not a fun habit, and that I was actually given an opportunity to avoid a very terrible and very low bottom. But the other important thing that I learned about, and the biggest challenge of me, is something that my sponsor encouraged me early in step 1 to do, and that's cross out the word alcohol and replace it with the word life. And this idea for me, this powerlessness over life, this unmanageability over life, it's like, come on, man, I have 2 cars in the garage. Like, I'm that case that they outline it in the 12 and 12. I still have a wife, and I still have a daughter. I have a great job. And what my sponsor helped me realize is that it was hanging on by a thread that I had drenched in kerosene and was holding a match to. And that to me was the biggest eye-opening experience. I was on step one for a long, long time because this notion of defeat, I always remember when they would read how it works and they would be like, oh, this simple program. And I was like, this guy's asking me to admit complete defeat about my life. Like, what is simple about that? I've never bowed out and admitted defeat of anything in my entire life, much less all of my life. And I am so grateful because this notion of it being the bedrock of the program, being the taproot from which happy and purposeful lives may be built. Without that experience and just kind of coasting through, because I was also looking around the rooms and I was like, this person came in next to me and he's on step 4. What's up? And he was like, well, maybe he's better at admitting defeat than you are. And I was like, better than me? I'll show him. And what I also learned about was just because I admitted defeat doesn't mean that I was practicing it. And one of my most humbling stories is pretty innocuous. We were going out to a family lunch one day. It was at a restaurant that I didn't choose. So naturally, I was entitled to be a grumpy Gus about it. We get to the restaurant that I didn't really want to be at. I ordered my delicious sandwich, my veggie burger. They didn't have it. Didn't they know I was coming? And so I didn't need to call my sponsor at this point in time because I had it. I'm just going to say, instead of being angry and resentful to everyone, I'm just not going to say anything. I'm going to skip to step 10 and just practice restraint. So I sat there in silent scorn for a long time and it didn't work. My wife got very upset with me and I ruined the lunch for everyone. So I called my sponsor afterwards and I was like, dude, I did it. I didn't make a scene. I wasn't grumpy or angry outwardly. Maybe it was a little bit. And he was like, you were feeling bad and you didn't call me. Why? And I was like, oh, it's water in the bridge. I'll fix it with my wife. And what he told me was, and what my wife even commented after the fact was, I can go outside and call my sponsor and shore something up. And what I recognized is I could save a lot of problems and shrapnel in my life if I preempted it instead of let it fall out pretty drastically. And even though that was a silly instance, it's one that stuck with me for a long time because it's always a good reminder for me that I can either invest 2 minutes on the front end to quickly curtail something, or I can deal with it for 2 days after. And I don't have time to waste on reclamation projects anymore, so I'm not going to utilize it that way. The next item that stands out for me, this all meant, of course, we had substituted negative for positive thinking. Step 2, 12 and 12. I'm not done. I'm going to keep going. So when I think of the way to describe my life, the word unfulfilled describes my prior life. And the reason that I think of that word is because all I wanted was reasonable. I just wanted more of everything. I wanted more attention. I wanted more prestige, more excitement, more money, more love. But I was never grateful for what I actually did have. And so I can think of several instances, but I would get a raise and I'd immediately ask, like, come on, boss, when are you going to hook me up with a promotion? Or I could pay off my student loans a year after I graduated from grad school. And then I'd be like, well, come on, babe, we got to pay off our mortgage. And I remember one time my wife pointedly asking me, how much money would it take for me to be satisfied? And I sat there and I was like, $10 million? And I didn't say anything out loud because I didn't want it to be held against me. But after I kept on thinking about it that night, I was like, yeah, there's probably no amount of money that would ever satisfy me because I just needed more. And there's a great story that Chuck C talks about this guy who is able to pick up any woman that he wants. And everything's going great for him until he finds that one woman that he can't pick up. And that kills him. And that was me, because nothing factual, it was a fact rather, that nothing was ever going to be sufficient for me to be satisfied. I would get to one avenue that I crossed off as my goal and then immediately multiply it by 10 and keep on doing that because I needed something to propel me. Happiness was somewhere. I just had to keep running towards the end of the rainbow. And I carried that toxic attitude throughout my entire life. And this whole passage just helped me understand how deeply that negative thinking permeated into my life. And one of the best things that I've learned in this program is that I can face the facts of life, and then I can react, and I can usually almost always be satisfied and settled as a result of that. My problem was I had no humility, so I couldn't look objectively at anything. I did it off of feel and immediate reaction because I had to react, and that was no way to live. My sponsors helped me look at things objectively, like my budget that I used to complain about all the time. And I realized that I was leaving a lot of things out of the budget on purpose so that I could have a grudge against my wife for spending too much. And that's just a waste of time. And I looked this morning to see when I started my daily gratitude log that my sponsor encouraged me to do. And it was March 6th of 2019. And every day since then, I start off my morning after I grab my coffee, of course, with a log of what I'm grateful for that day. And what I have found is that centering myself and tethering myself to positivity has created an anchor that allows me to practice that positivity throughout the entire day. And it also provides me a pretty readily measurable item of, I can say that I'm thankful for my wife and my daughter, but am I actually practicing that? Am I saying thank you to them, or am I doing what I used to do, which is say one thing and then just immediately pivot to criticism or being overly negative? And now I can confidently say that my actions match what I'm thinking on the inside. And I didn't know that that was ever going to be a possibility. The other thing is, and this was an incredible experience because my mistress, my dog, Grace, my wife was like, what? This beautiful dog. She was like 8 years old, Rhodesian Ridgeback. She was the best dog in the history of the world. I will trademark that, and I will argue with you if you feel otherwise. But she suddenly passed away earlier this year, and it was heart-wrenching. And one thing that my sponsor and others encouraged me was to think back and be grateful for what I experienced with her. And I will never forget this, but I was driving home from a workout like a day or two after she passed away, and all I could image was her waiting for me when I get back from my international trips at the door, just shaking and just being so excited. And I was like, no one is ever gonna, no offense, babe, but no one is ever gonna love me like that. No one is ever gonna demonstrate that type of unconditional love. And what a joy in my life to be able to experience that and have that animal in my life. Even if it was for not as long as I thought that I should have it, it was a blessing. And to focus and frame things on the positive as opposed to the negative, it's taken a lot of work to get there, but it's a lot more fulfilling and a much better way to approach things. And I realize I'm running out of time here, so I'm only going to get through like 6 more of these. Just kidding. I do want to get through one more though. And this is happened to be the topic this morning. Jay totally poached it from me. And it is, the philosophy of self-sufficiency is not paying off. Plainly enough, it is a bone-crushing juggernaut whose final achievement is ruin. And this is from step 3 in the 12 and 12. And for me, this one was like lifting me upside down and shaking out the coins out of my pocket, because my entire life, literally my entire life, I was under the impression that if I could be self-sufficient, then boom, you're an adult and you made it. And turns out that is not true. And I've seen it be not true. I had this false sense of confidence because when I was relaying the story about when I was a freshman in high school and my parents got divorced, well, I meandered around school. I got a 2.2 GPA. And later in the spring, I was like, next year, I'm going to try a little bit harder. And the next year, I got a 3.6 GPA. And that, unfortunately, taught me that I can will myself to do anything, which isn't the actual case. Because in about a year before I came into the program, my father committed suicide in April of 2018. And my father was like, he could do no wrong. He could walk on water for all I knew. I idolized him. I wanted to be everything like him. He taught me a lot about business. He taught me a lot about a good work ethic. But, I just viewed him as infallible. And a lot of the things that I can now see were shortcomings of his, I was modeling the exact same behavior. I didn't need other people to help me because I could figure it out myself. I could be arrogant because I deserved it because I was smart, or I could be controlling of other people and not really care for what they thought because, I'm the breadwinner of the house. All these asinine things that I was replicating. And at the end of the day, what I recognized with my dad is that he didn't have the gift of an outlet. He didn't have the gift of a program and someone to guide him, to provide him recommendations, to bounce ideas off of. Because at the end of the day, no one can do it on their own. No one knows. If we did, certainly wouldn't be here, and we'd probably be an elevated life force altogether. And if I went through that whole experience of my dad and then replicated the exact same thing and put my wife, my daughter, my family in that situation, how could I think about myself positively? And that was the exact path that I was going down. I just didn't want help. I thought that I had it, but there was an emptiness inside my dad, and that was the same emptiness inside of me. And someone told me this amazing thing about breaking the chain. And I used to think that these things in me were innate, that I couldn't change them, like chalk it up to Seth's a competitive jerk. No, he's just born that way. Just let him be that way. You can change. And I just needed someone that could show me the right way to live. And I needed to follow their lead because I certainly didn't know what the right way was. And what a gift it is to have a new crack at life, because I know exactly what the path that I was skating down looked like. And it was empty. It was me being alone. It was probably some tears, and it wasn't going to be fun or fulfilling or happy or wholly useful in any capacity. It was going to be depressing. And this program's given me a gift and an opportunity to redo my life and build it upon permanent values that I can anchor to. And that makes me grateful every single day. And I have noticed in this program that I get out of it exactly the same amount that I put in. And that propels me to want to do more and more, because if I only got to where I was 6 months ago, I still wouldn't have been all that great. And I can continue to refine and improve behaviors, curtail other defects of character, learn a lot more about humility, develop a much more fulsome relationship with my higher power. And the changes in terms of how this transcends into all facets of my life is encouraging. It's promising. I see it at work. I see it at home. I got to celebrate my 1-year anniversary of sobriety this year by taking my daughter to Disney World. And one, if I were not sober, I never would have let someone else choose the travel destination. 2, even if they did, I would have backed out of the trip and made my wife go in my place. And 3, I certainly would have never had fun at Disney World. But now, because I'm not the selfish jerk that I used to be, I can take joy and pride in other people. I can enjoy doing things that I didn't choose. And I can be happy regardless of the circumstances around me. And the weather used to tee me off. If it was muggy outside, I can be a jerk that day. And now it can be whatever it wants outside, unless it's snowing with limited electricity. And then I get a little leeway for being a little grumpy. But I really appreciate the opportunity to share. I appreciate the opportunity to get to know all of you, to develop in this program together, and to continue inspiring positive change in one another and new people that come into our lives. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Seth. That was really good. And the recording went very well. So the floor is now open for questions.
You guys, who wants to meet my wife? She's laying on the ground right here.
Oh, yeah, we want to meet her. Yeah. I brought my husband. So I saw a hand. Did I see your hand, Marty, or not? For questions?
That was the clap emoji, but
you were clapping. Okay, so we can now ask questions, or we can share. I would share that I am very impressed about the different tone that I found in you in Spanish and in English. I'm super interested in languages, And each language, I believe, has its own soul. And I could contrast the way that you share in Spanish, the way that you share in English. And even though it's the same, road, the same result of like a happy, joyous, functional living, in Spanish, you are more solemn than in English. And I think that it was because in Argentina, you had to push yourself to be such a good student. I'm also different in English than in Spanish. In English, I'm softer, I guess. Yeah, softer and as humble as I'm ever going to get. Because English is not my first language. Some people know me in Spanish, and I have a very different reputation. So that is something, right, that caught my attention. And I also, like, even though it's funny, like you went on a knee and you asked the boy to be your sponsor. I think I know it made me laugh, but at the same time, I relate to that. I look around the room and I found that the person that I admired the most, I was so impressed by her practical application of the ideas of the big book. And she's super, super tall, and she's sleeping right now. She lives in the UK. And I gather the bravery to not fall on my knee, but to look to the heights and to say, Jonna, will you please sponsor me? She was 28 and I was 48. And she sponsored me, and she was the very first person that took me through the big book. So I also relate to that one. Okay, somebody share, please, or just let's Seth to tell us something. Nobody wants to ask a question? Oh, I see Crystal and I see Jay. Crystal and then Jay.
Hi, my name is Crystal. I'm an alcoholic. Seth, I just wanted to thank you for speaking tonight. Every time that you share in group, and tonight, you inspire me. Truly, like your story, everybody says, oh, find somebody who you relate the most to. So I tell everybody that I wish Seth was a woman, because I want Seth to be my sponsor, because your story is so relatable to me. And you just really seem to have all your shit together. Gosh, I can't help but do that. You seem to really have everything together. And I don't know, I look forward to hearing you speak, and I'm really glad that you got to come and tell your story tonight. I just want to tell you thank you for that.
Thank you, Crystal. Jay and then Ellen.
Hi, y'all. I'm Jay. I'm a grateful alcoholic. Yeah, Seth, you got your poop in a group. It's great. I love seeing it. And truly, it's been a wonderful relationship, seeing your progress from when we met that first day in the Preston group to where you are now. Because what I have begun to experience in the program is something tremendously wonderful. And being a sponsor to somebody and being able to watch somebody go from wherever they were in their lives to having a wonderful life that is filled with joy, and then watch them help other people, like it says in Working with Others, or what, I can't remember what chapter it is. I think that's what it is. It really is such a wonderful experience for me, and I know what the book is talking about now, because it's one thing to, for example, do my step 5 with somebody else when I'm sharing my step 4. And it's another thing entirely to be the one who is receiving the step 5. And they say that's when you really become a member of AA. So I feel like I've even become a double member of AA, because I've been able to witness you go through all of the 12 steps and continue practicing all of the steps, and teach even other people how to begin practicing all 12 steps. So what I'm curious to know about from you is, when it talks about a kit of spiritual tools that gets placed at our feet, what are some of the spiritual tools that you're able to utilize today that have been useful for you in the business world and in the relationship at home?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I would say that it almost goes in concert with things that were highlighted as defects of character and shortcomings for me. And my lack of communication, I used to expect people to be telepathic and just infer whatever I was grumbling in my my crazy head. And when they didn't, then I would flip. It happened at work. It would happen at home. It still happens at home sometimes. My wife still helps me understand situations in which I'm expecting mind reading out of her, where real words or real communication may be beneficial. And that's the beauty of being able to keep on working at the program. But, I always wanted to control every facet of everything, be it at my house, at work. And, it talks about on page 88 that we will no longer tire so easily because we're not wasting all of our energy trying to arrange life to suit ourselves. And that has absolutely proven true. I've been able to learn how to take this to my work, to home, and trust in other people and give them the benefit of the doubt and delegate. And I don't need to arrange Tupperware in a certain way because you know what? We're still going to be able to serve leftovers if they're however my wife did it, whether or not I disagree with that being the optimal structure. And that's okay. But it used to not be okay. Things like that would unhinge me. And now I just have a much higher degree of comfort knowing that things have been, always will be okay, so long as I trust my higher power.
Thank you. Ellen and Kate.
Thanks, Seth. My name is Ellen. I'm an alcoholic. I got the biggest kick out of you tonight. I just never knew you were like this. I thought I always you reminded me of some frat boy or something, And tonight I realized what a loving husband you are and how you dote on your child, and what a change that we have in this program from where we came from and where we are today. And, we are normally a group of people that would not mix. And I doubt if I could have ever met any of you lovely people if I didn't finally learn how to Zoom, because I'm like a prehistoric animal when it comes to this stuff. But, I just tell you, man, Seth, I really enjoyed you. And I really care a lot for you, Seth. Thank you.
Thank you, Ellen.
Thanks, Ellen. I was my fraternity president and social chair, by the way, so you had that spot
on. Yes, I just want to thank you for taking the time tonight to share your story. And having come into this group, this is my first and only group, really, that I've ever been in. And I think what kept me here, obviously, we're hearing all the successes of you and Jay and Richard and Marcella and Ellen, but the camaraderie that I sensed among you guys was fantastic. The appreciation, but also the fun, the joking back and forth, just the common ways you guys all learned from each other, and you were so helpful to so many people, and and you were having fun doing it, and you had no regrets, and you weren't angry, and you weren't, oh, woe is me, it ruined my life. You said it sucked, I changed it, and I'm moving ahead. And I just love hearing that. You've got a family and a wife, and it sounds like an amazing job, and it's very, very inspiring. And I've said it before, but maybe these things that we've been through are all for good reason, because finding you guys and hearing you and all the successes has been remarkable for me in my almost 90 days. So thank you for taking the time to share and taking time away from your family to make us all more successful.
Thank you, Kate. Jeff and then Jill.
Thanks, Seth. Hey, I just wanted to say I really, really enjoyed listening to you. And as you were speaking, I had to really think about how it was when I met you the first time and how you were, because you are a completely different person from the person I met not that long ago. And it's not so much what I really enjoy listening to what you had to say, but for me, it's been able to see the difference in your actions. And, I'll give you one example. And that was, I remember early on when I would talk to you when you were first going to your first few meetings, and you were always somewhere else. And I felt like I was bothering you and you had to go all the time. And now it's like when I talk to you, it's like you're there you're with me. You're super helpful. Anytime I've ever talked to you, you've always left me with things that have been helpful in my recovery. So I just wanted to say I appreciate it, and you've made a big impact on my life and many other people along the way. Thanks.
Thank you, Jeff. Jill, are you there?
I am. My camera won't turn on. Oh, hey. I think it has a lot to do with why my volume or it doesn't work out well. Anyways, long story short, Seth is my twin. I have been in this journey now for, well, 7.5 months. I've been through
Jill, would you be so concerned, Jill?
up to 8 meetings a day.
Jill,
And I can honestly say I have not met my polar.
Jill, we turned the video off to see if your connection improves, because you're coming up blurry, and your speed and your sound is like groggy underwater.
Wait, there you are. Am
Okay.
I still underwater?
No, you're better.
Okay. I can't be seen, apparently, and talk. But again, you are so similar to me. I have met via Zoom so many people from across the world, and you will say things, and I know the answer before you say it, because I live the same type of way, always. I got in trouble in kindergarten because I left, because I didn't like what the teacher had to say. My first word was at 2. I'm so sorry, Marcella. It was shit, because I slammed my blocks down because they wouldn't stay up. And my grandmother, who never uttered a curse word in her entire life, was standing there with my mom. My mom said she turned white as a ghost and almost passed out. So there's so many parallels in the way our lives have gone through school, through being an extrovert, introvert. I had to be friends with everyone because I was so afraid to be alone. But I didn't want to be with anybody because I was sick. I hated everybody. So for me, I really enjoy it. I'm glad I know you now and not then, because I have a feeling we'd really smash heads a lot. But I enjoy you. I enjoy your time, and I love seeing this side with your wife and your daughter. I think that's awesome. So thank you.
Thank you, Jill. Jennifer.
Hi, everybody. Good evening. Jennifer, alcoholic. Seth, thank you so much for what a dynamic share. I was also just thinking about, a lot of what you said, and also finding so many similarities. I was such an overachiever. I mean, I would get anxiety, not so bad as much before the exams, but just like super like put myself through school, have to get the good grades, have to be top of the class, have to get another degree, working full time, getting an MBA at night, just relentless on myself. And all the while kind of drinking along all the while, and definitely the paradoxical personality elements as well. And lo and behold, time after, just as the disease progresses, which I never really knew or understand that it was an alcoholic disease, or that I was an alcoholic at the time for all those years, I would have to drink, though, to get that external extrovert skin going. I'd be so anxious, with meeting people, or, just, super acting like taking a lot of risks and being really super strong, but really having low self-confidence. It's just interesting to see some of the similarities as well. And so I'm so grateful to hear and learn from your story, you know, how as we're on this path and how we're in AA and learning how this program works and really understanding, you know, what alcohol is and why we use it, you know, is just so helpful for unlocking the wisdom. You know, I know it's our higher power, definitely, but it also really helps to understand, you know, what we were even going through. So really happy to meet you, and thanks again for your share.
Thank you, Jennifer. Marty?
Hello, everyone. Marty, alcoholic from out in New Jersey. So, Seth, I had a question. You know, our lives were pretty different, but some things definitely in common. You know, neither of us were institutionalized, so we have that going for us. But in addition to that, you know, we both share a sponsor. And one thing that comes up frequently between me and my sponsor, and I don't know how frequently it would have come up with you and yours. I certainly wasn't the president of my fraternity. You know, I wasn't in a fraternity. I definitely didn't have that whole, like, you know, no amount of alcohol in the world made me a fish in water socially. Nothing really did. But the program of Alcoholics Anonymous has helped me communicate much more effectively, not just to my wife and you know, but in all respects. And Jay mentioned something to me today about starting to experience the promises of the program before you know, you're even halfway through the program. And I think one thing that I've noticed is when people ask me, you know, why it's important to get a sponsor, stuff like that, there are specific examples that come to mind of me in my life that I've already experienced some development. And I'm wondering, what were some examples for you earlier on, you know, when you started working with Jay? Like Jeffrey mentioned a few things. I'm wondering if there were some anecdotes or things that came to mind where your family started to notice some differences in you, and if you wouldn't mind kind of sharing on some of that.
Yeah, no, that would be a great time to ask my wife to come in, but she's helping our daughter get ready for bed right now. I would be enamored with the potential response, and so it's gone a couple of different ways. It's always reassuring to hear firsthand from the people that you live with, especially when pre-COVID, I was on the road 1 or 2 days a week probably, and working late and not always around. So it'd be hard to see a lot of discernible changes that quickly. But in the COVID environment, I'm home all day, every day, and they cannot escape my positivity just radiating from this little tiny office adjacent from our bedroom. And, you know, my daughter used to not really want to hang out with me. I was just always critical. I would tell her, like, that's not how you play with Play-Doh correctly. Certain things I would not play with or engage with her at all, like Play-Doh. The smell of that used to just peeve me so much. I was like, I'm not getting my hands on that. I can't kick the smell for a day. But now, and then even when I would be playing with her, it'd be like, yeah, your daddy's, you know, checking out Instagram models. What were you saying? And just kind of never being there. And now she knows that I'm present, and she knows that I care about her. And that's why she asked me if we could go on a trip together. And she asked me to tuck her in certain nights at bed, and she never wanted me. She used to say, like, Daddy, you're stinky, because I'd smell like booze or weed or cigarettes. And my breath still smells pretty bad because it's Invisalign things, but not as bad as it used to, I guess. And I was in bed with her the other night. So my daughter definitely likes being around me. My wife, I'll speak on her behalf, she definitely loves me way more now than she ever used to. I'm nicer. I'm not always crawling up her tush, telling her exactly how to do things, even though sometimes I relapse and do that. But on the whole, our relationship is a lot more open. Like, she's not walking on eggshells because Grumpy Gus is going to come around with the cane and, you know, spew a bunch of vitriol towards her. I'm a lot nicer, open, happier to help. I used to think that I was this like 1950s atomic dad, and like, oh, man comes home, man wants food, man wants to be left alone so he can isolate in the corner. And now I'm like, hey, let's make dinner together, let's do stuff together, not as apart as we operated for so long of our lives, because I was intolerable to be around. So this past weekend we actually went and had like a little date weekend where we spent time together, and it was incredible. And we're engaged with one another, and that never happened, either because she was drinking or I was drinking, or when she stopped drinking, then I was figuring out ways to hide my drinking and, divide whatever I had to drink by 6 so that it wouldn't be offensive to her. And I don't have to lie anymore.
Thank you, Seth. I see Douglas and I see Kate.
Hey, I'm Doug. I'm an alcoholic, and tonight you had me at Tupperware and organizing that. I live alone, so I can organize that stuff so well, and my efficiency rate of getting leftovers put away are like amazing. But I honestly, like, you were in that list of names when I first came in that I was jotting things down, and I wrote down that he was 0 to 10 in terms of like either like we're drinking or we're not doing it at all. And I don't know, I completely related to that. And every time you share, it's such a good mixture for me anyway of going deep within your program and how you've gotten to where you are, and your knowledge of the program and your knowledge of self mixed with a bit of humor is, I don't know, that's what I need. I find this to be for myself a very extremely heavy program. It's a lot of self-searching, and while that's great and I'm learning a lot from the experience so far, I do need moments in time where it's a little bit lighter, and I appreciate your ability to blend those two things together and still make your points and be able to help other people. So I appreciate that. I was really trying hard to come up with a question to ask, and I can't think of anything, except I did think of one, is how do you think they get the extra cheddar into like the cheddar goldfish? Because when I was in Texas, I bought a big thing of goldfish to have tonight, and it says there's extra cheddar. So
Throw that
how
away.
they get the extra.
I wouldn't feed that to my dog. If it's not regular whole grain goldfish, you're not doing it right. So erroneous.
Okay, I guess, Kate, are you going to ask something else, or are we going to say?
Yes, no, I just had one quick question. Sorry to raise my hand again, but I wanted to ask this before and I forgot. One of the things I see in you, Seth, is that your confidence in your sobriety, which is very refreshing. And I too have confidence that I'm here and I'm going to stay here. And it helps that your wife is sober and my husband has never drank. So that really helps also. But at what point in your program did you really believe? I hear a lot of times that people are really enthusiastic in the beginning, and I was scared, I was nervous, I was sad, emotional, but I was also enthusiastic and I felt better every day. So that helps with enthusiasm. But when did you really think, since you don't have 46 years or 12 years, or, you have a really nice amount of time, you're there, you're stable, you've done it. But you don't have 20 years under your belt. When did you know, or when have you started really believing in yourself that this is where you were meant to be and you're not going to ever turn back?
That's a really good question. I wouldn't say if there was an exact moment. I pretty much knew that this was the river Styx. There was no turning back once I crossed over it. But what became abundantly clear for me, and this is a bizarre example, but it was January of 2020, I think. It was one of my best friends, and my friends and I used to go hard, and some of them still do. But it was one of their birthdays, and they had these amazing like front row tickets for a Mavs game against the Clippers. And I don't think I'd been to a sporting event sober since I was like 11. That used to be just pull the ripcord and go hard. And I went to this basketball game, and as you probably understood from my share, I'm a big basketball fan. I have never enjoyed an event more in my entire life than that night. And that includes like going to, national championships, Wimbledon's, World Cups, you name it. And it was just so nice to be there and be present and not looking at my watch and then being like, 3 minutes left in the third quarter, got to go get 6 more beers for the fourth quarter. Just being physically there, but not being mentally there. That's how I was my entire life. And I just viewed everything, every type of social outing as a glorified drinking game. And to be there, to have fun with my friends, to laugh, to actually witness, these incredible athletes doing incredible things. And then the nightcap of it was I took my friends to a bar because they wanted to. And then I drove all of them home, got them home safely. I woke up with 0 hangover, went to a workout at 4:30 in the morning, and I felt fantastic. And that showed me that I don't need, just because my old habit was always drinking, regardless of what I was doing, I didn't need to fill these voids in my life because they no longer existed. I could find meaning in doing simple things and being of value to other people and actually participating in real life as opposed to finding convoluted ways to escape it. And that, for me, I was like, I came back that next morning, I woke up and I was like, holy shit, that night was incredible. It was like I met Santa Claus. And from that point on, I was just like, this is awesome. And every time that I've gone out with friends since then and seen them drink and been able to get them home safely, and then, I'll call to make sure they're okay the next day, and I hear them and I hear me, and I'm able to make breakfast with my daughter. It's like I am never going back to that because I don't need to.
Thank you so much, Seth. Well, that's all the time we have. And would you be so kind to lead us in prayer, Seth?
Yeah. This one is one of my favorites. It's a St. Francis prayer. Lord, make me an instrument of thy peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is discord, union. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. Where there is sadness, joy. Grant that I may not so much seek to be consoled as to console, to be understood as to understand, to be loved as to loved. For it is in giving that we receive, it is in pardoning that we are pardoned, and it is in dying that we are born to eternal life. Amen.